That morning felt exactly like every other morning of my life. The alarm rang at the same time it always did. Not too loud. Not too soft. Just loud enough to pull me out of sleep without emotion. I reached out, silenced it, and lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet you get used to when you live alone long enough. I got up, walked across the cold floor, and opened the curtains. The city outside was already awake. Cars moved. People rushed. Life went on, busy, loud, full. Mine, however, stayed carefully predictable. Shower. Coffee. Clean shirt. The same routine I had followed for years. Predictability had become my comfort zone. No surprises meant no disappointment. No expectations meant no heartbreak. Somewhere along the way, I had convinced myself that this was enough. Work, deadlines, coffee, sleep, repeat. Love was no longer part of the plan. Not because I didn't believe in it, but because I had stopped expecting it to find me. I stepped out of my apartment and merged into the crowd, another face in a city full of strangers. Everyone seemed to be going somewhere important. I was too. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The cafe near my office sat on the corner of a familiar street. I had been going there almost daily for years. Same door. Same smell of roasted coffee. Same low hum of conversation. The barista didn't even ask for my order anymore. A nod was enough. That's how ordinary my life had become, so routine that even strangers knew my habits. I took my usual seat near the window, placed my coffee on the table, and opened my phone. Emails. Notifications. Meetings. My mind shifted into work mode as it always did. Another long day ahead. Another series of tasks to complete. Another evening to return home alone. Everything was normal. Then the door opened. At first, I didn't notice. The sound blended into the background, the clink of cups, the hiss of the coffee machine, the low murmur of voices. People came and went all the time. Doors opened and closed. Nothing about it should have mattered. But something did. Something I couldn't explain made me lift my eyes from my phone. And that's when I saw her. She walked in quietly, without drawing attention, yet somehow all of it belonged to her. There was no dramatic entrance. No pause. No music. Just a woman stepping into a cafe like she had done 1,000 times before. And still, the room felt different. Brighter. Quieter. As if the world had slowed down, not for everyone, just for me. She stood near the entrance for a moment, scanning the room, deciding where to go. She brushed her hair behind her ear, a simple, unconscious gesture. And in that small movement, something inside me shifted. I didn't know her name. I didn't know her story. I didn't know where she came from or where she was going. But I knew, deep down, that this moment mattered. My heart reacted before my mind could stop it. A sudden awareness. A strange warmth. Like something long asleep had just opened its eyes. I tried to look away. I told myself she was just another stranger. Another person passing through my ordinary day. I reminded myself that moments like this meant nothing. That people come and go. That hope only leads to disappointment. But my heart didn't listen. My eyes followed her as she walked toward the counter. The way she smiled politely. The calm confidence in her posture. The quiet presence that felt louder than noise. For the first time in a long time, I forgot about my emails. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the future or the past. I was fully present. And that scared me. Because I had built my life on being untouched. Unmoved. Safe. I had convinced myself that ordinary was enough. That predictable was peaceful. That loneliness was easier than loss. Yet, in that single moment, my carefully controlled world cracked open. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to let something new in. I didn't know it then, but my ordinary life had already changed. Because once she walked in, nothing would ever feel the same again. I had seen beautiful people before. I had passed them on streets, noticed them in rooms, admired them from a distance. Beauty, on its own, was familiar. Predictable. Something my eyes could recognize without my heart getting involved. But this felt different. It wasn't just the way she looked. It was the calm she carried with her, like the world didn't rush her the way it rushed everyone else. There was a quiet confidence in her movements, unforced, natural, effortless. As if she was exactly where she belonged, exactly who she was meant to be. She stepped up to the counter and ordered her coffee softly. Her voice wasn't loud, yet it carried warmth. She smiled at the barista, not out of habit, not out of politeness, but like she genuinely meant it. Like she had all the time in the world, even in a place where everyone else seemed to be in a hurry. I watched her without realizing I was doing it. And then she turned around. Our eyes met. It lasted only a second. Maybe less. A moment so small it should have been meaningless. But in that second, something unexplainable passed between us. Surprise. Curiosity. A silent question neither of us asked out loud. Her eyes widened just slightly, then softened. She smiled, not fully, not openly, just enough to acknowledge the moment. And then she looked away, as if she felt it too and didn't know what to do with it. But that smile stayed with me. I told myself not to read too much into it. People smile every day. Strangers cross paths, exchange looks, and forget each other just as quickly. It happens all the time. It means nothing. That's what my mind said. My heart, however, didn't agree. It began to beat faster, louder, like it was trying to get my attention. Like it was warning me that something important had just happened, whether I was ready for it or not. She took a seat a few tables away, near the window. Sunlight streamed in softly, resting on her face like it belonged there. For a moment, the rest of the cafe faded into the background. I forgot about my emails. I forgot about my meetings. I forgot about the carefully planned life I had convinced myself was enough. I watched her stir her coffee slowly, absent-mindedly, lost in her own thoughts. There was something peaceful about the way she sat there, alone but not lonely, comfortable in her silence. And suddenly, my mind filled with questions I hadn't asked myself in years. What was she thinking about? Where did she come from? What kind of life had shaped her into the person sitting there right now? And why, out of all the days, out of all the mornings, did she walk in today? Part of me wanted to speak to her. To stand up, walk over, and say something, anything. A simple hello. A harmless comment about the coffee. A chance. But another part of me, the louder one, told me to stay where I was. That voice reminded me of everything I had learned the hard way. Love disappoints. Hope hurts. Attachment leads to loss. I had built walls around my life for a reason. Strong walls. Safe walls. Walls that kept my heart protected and untouched. I had survived by keeping my distance, by not wanting too much, by not feeling too deeply. And yet, there I was, unable to look away, feeling something I had promised myself I wouldn't feel again. I didn't know her name. I didn't know her story. But I knew this, something had already changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, deep inside me, like the first crack in a wall that had stood untouched for years. I didn't understand how or why. I only knew that the moment I saw her, my heart remembered something my mind had tried to forget. And once again, I realized. Some moments don't ask for permission. They just happen. And they change you forever. Fate has a strange sense of timing. It doesn't rush. It doesn't warn you. It simply waits for the exact moment when you're least prepared for anything meaningful to happen. She stood up from her chair, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. I noticed it a second too late. As she turned, she accidentally bumped into my table. My coffee slid to the side, stopping just before it spilled. For a brief moment, time froze. We both reacted at the same time. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said quickly. Her voice wasn't panicked. It wasn't awkward. It was warm, sincere, and calm, like mistakes didn't scare her. Like she trusted the world to be kind back. "It's okay," I replied, standing up without thinking. No damage done. Our eyes met again. Closer this time. Close enough to notice the small details, The way her expression softened with relief, the way my own heart suddenly forgot its rhythm. Then she laughed. Not loud. Not nervous. Just soft. And that laugh felt effortless. Real. Honest. Not something practiced or polite. It was the kind of sound that came naturally, without fear of being judged. Something inside me loosened. We started talking. Not because we planned to. Not because either of us had prepared a line. It just happened. We talked about nothing important, and somehow everything at once. The weather, and how unpredictable it had been lately. The cafe, and how it always felt warmer than the streets outside. The city, and how crowded it could feel even when you were surrounded by people. Simple words. Ordinary topics. But the way they flowed felt anything but ordinary. There was no awkward pause. No searching for the right thing to say. The conversation moved naturally, like it already knew where it was going. Like we'd been mid-sentence before we even met. She told me her name. Hearing it felt strangely familiar, like a word I'd known but hadn't spoken yet. I told her mine. The way she repeated it quietly, just once, made my chest tighten in a way I didn't understand. Time started behaving differently. The noise around us faded, the clinking of cups, the hum of the coffee machine, the low conversations from nearby tables. The cafe was still there, but it felt distant, like the world had stepped back to give us space. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't racing ahead. I wasn't thinking about work. I wasn't thinking about deadlines. I wasn't thinking about where I needed to be next. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I felt it. She spoke with gentle gestures, her hands moving naturally with her words. When I spoke, she listened, not just hearing me, but really listening. Her attention didn't wander. Her eyes didn't search the room. She was present. That kind of presence felt rare. Almost forgotten. I realized how long it had been since someone had looked at me like that, like the moment mattered. Then she glanced at her phone. Her eyes widened slightly, and her shoulders tensed just a bit. "Oh," she said softly. "I should go." Reality slipped back in quietly. The moment didn't break. It just ended. I nodded, hiding the disappointment I hadn't expected to feel so strongly. "Yeah, me too." We stood there for a second longer than necessary. Neither of us moved. Then she hesitated. Just for a heartbeat. She smiled again, the same gentle smile that had stayed with me since the first moment our eyes met. "Maybe I'll see you here again," she said. It wasn't a promise. But it wasn't empty either. "Maybe," I replied. But inside, I hoped it meant more than politeness. More than something people say without thinking. She turned and walked toward the door. I watched her leave, noticing details I hadn't meant to notice. The way she held the door open, the way she paused for half a second before stepping outside, the way she glanced back once, quickly, as if to make sure the moment had been real. Then the door closed behind her. And suddenly, the cafe felt quieter. Colder. Different. I sat back down slowly, staring at the coffee that had nearly spilled. That's when the realization settled in. I wanted to see her again. Not because she was beautiful. Not because the conversation had been easy. But because something deeper had shifted. Something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Wanting someone meant risk. It meant hope. It meant opening doors I had kept closed for years. And that terrified me. Yet, even as fear whispered its warnings, another feeling spoke louder. That conversation wasn't accidental. And neither was the way it made me feel. I tried to forget her. At first, it felt easy to convince myself it was nothing. Just a moment. Just a conversation between two strangers who happened to cross paths on an ordinary day. People meet. People talk. And then life moves on. That's what I told myself. But days passed. And she didn't leave my thoughts. Every morning, as I walked into the cafe, my eyes searched for her without asking me. I'd scan the room casually, or at least pretend to, hoping to see her sitting near the window, stirring her coffee the way she always did. When she wasn't there, I felt it immediately. Disappointment. A quiet, unexpected weight in my chest. And when she was there, my heart raced like it had been waiting. We began talking more. At first, it was just brief exchanges. A smile. A few words. A shared glance that lasted a second longer than it should have. Then those moments stretched into conversations. Conversations turned into time. Coffee became shared lunches. Short talks became long walks. Silence became comfortable. I started learning things about her, not the obvious things, but the real ones. Her dreams. The things she wanted but never said out loud. The fears she tried to hide behind humor and calm smiles. There was a quiet strength in her. A resilience shaped by experiences she never fully explained. She carried her past lightly, but I could tell it wasn't light at all. And without realizing when it happened, I started falling. That's when fear stepped in. Not loudly, not suddenly, but steadily. I felt it the moment my thoughts began to revolve around her. The moment her presence started to feel necessary instead of optional. The moment her absence felt heavier than it should. So I did what I had learned to do best. I pulled back. I became careful with my words, choosing safety over honesty. I kept conversations light, avoiding anything that felt too deep, too revealing. I laughed less. I shared less. I guarded myself like my heart was something fragile that needed constant protection. She noticed. Of course she did. You can't grow close to someone and not feel when they start to drift away. One evening, as we sat across from each other, she looked at me quietly for a moment before speaking. "Why do you feel so far away lately?" she asked. Her voice was gentle. Not accusing. Not angry. Just honest. And that made it harder. I searched for an answer that wouldn't expose me. That wouldn't reveal how scared I really was. "I'm just busy," I said. It was a lie. A simple one. An easy one. But it sat heavy between us. Because the truth was so much simpler, and so much heavier. I was afraid. Afraid of needing her. Afraid of trusting again. Afraid of losing control over the carefully structured life I had built to keep myself safe. I had learned the cost of love once before. I remembered how hope could turn into pain. How opening your heart meant giving someone the power to break it. And I wasn't sure I could survive that again. But love doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't stop growing just because you ask it to. It doesn't disappear just because you pretend not to feel it. It grows quietly, patiently, even when you resist it. And the more I fought it, the clearer it became. I wasn't protecting myself. I was already losing the battle. Because love had already found its way in. And no matter how hard I tried to push it away, it wasn't leaving. Distance doesn't always mean miles. Sometimes, it's silence. We were still in the same city. Still visiting the same places. Still sitting across from each other at the same cafe tables. And yet, something had shifted in a way I couldn't ignore. The ease was gone. The warmth that once flowed so naturally between us began to fade. Conversations felt careful now, like we were both afraid of saying the wrong thing. Smiles came less often. Laughter felt quieter, restrained. We were close. But we weren't connected. I could feel her pulling away. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just slowly, protecting herself the same way I had once protected myself. And for the first time, I understood what my distance must have felt like to her. It hurt. Because now I was on the other side of it. I noticed the small changes first. The way she checked her phone more often during our conversations. The way her replies came slower. The way she stopped asking questions about my day. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of guessing. Tired of holding space for someone who wouldn't step fully into it. One night, I sent her a message. Something simple. Something safe. She didn't reply. At first, I told myself she was busy. That she'd answer later. That I was overthinking, like I always did. But later never came. I sent another message the next day. Still nothing. Then another day passed. And another. Silence stretched longer than any argument ever could. I told myself 100 excuses. She was tired. She had work. She needed space. I clung to each explanation because the truth felt heavier than all of them combined. Deep down, I knew. I was losing her. Not because I didn't care. Not because she didn't matter to me. But because I hadn't been brave enough to show it. The cafe felt different without her presence. Emptier. Colder. The seat across from me stayed empty, and somehow, that emptiness felt louder than noise. Every cup of coffee reminded me of the ones we used to share. Every quiet corner held memories I had taken for granted. The city felt louder too. More rushed. More distant. Even surrounded by people, I felt alone. Everything reminded me of what I had pushed away in the name of safety. Of what I had avoided because I was too afraid of losing control. That's when it finally became clear. Love isn't about being ready. It isn't about having everything figured out. It isn't about waiting for the perfect moment when fear disappears. Love is about choosing to step forward. Even when your hands shake. Even when your heart feels exposed. Even when you're terrified of what you might lose. And I had waited too long. By the time I understood that, silence had already spoken for me. Louder than words ever could. When I finally saw her again, it felt like standing at the edge of something fragile. Like one wrong step could shatter everything that still existed between us. She was sitting there when I arrived, already waiting. Her posture was calm, composed, but different. There was a strength in the way she held herself now. A distance that hadn't been there before. She looked stronger. And somehow, farther away. We sat across from each other in silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but heavy. Words gathered at the back of my throat, but none of them felt right. The cafe around us faded into the background, just like it always did. But this time, the quiet felt sharp. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't know where I stood with you," she said. Her voice was steady. Controlled. There was no anger in it, no accusation. Just truth. "And I can't stay where I feel uncertain." Her words landed softly, and still managed to hurt more than anything else she could have said. Because she wasn't asking for an explanation. She was setting a boundary. I looked at her and realized how tired she must have been. Tired of waiting. Tired of guessing what I felt. Tired of standing in a place where love was never fully offered. I wanted to explain everything. I wanted to tell her about my past. About the heartbreaks that taught me caution. About the walls I had built so carefully, brick by brick, to keep myself safe. But in that moment, excuses felt meaningless. Because fear, no matter how understandable, still hurts the people you care about. "I was afraid," I said quietly. The words felt small, but they were true. I was afraid of opening my heart again. Afraid of needing someone. Afraid of losing control over the life I've built. My voice wavered, but I kept going. "But losing you." I paused, feeling the weight of it fully for the first time. "Losing you scares me more." She looked at me then, really looked at me. Not with anger. Not with pity. But with a searching gaze, as if she was looking past my words, past my excuses, trying to find the truth beneath them. She didn't rush me. She didn't interrupt. And that made the moment even more terrifying. "Then don't be halfway," she said finally. Her voice was calm, but firm. "Choose." That single word echoed louder than anything else in the room. Choose. In that moment, everything became clear. Love wasn't something that simply happened to me. It wasn't an accident or a coincidence or something I could blame on timing. Love was a decision. A choice. It was about stepping forward when it felt safer to stay back. About opening your heart even when it could be broken. About being fully present instead of standing at a distance, protecting yourself at the cost of someone else. I had spent so long waiting to feel ready. But readiness never comes without risk. I looked at her, at the woman who had walked into my ordinary life and changed it in ways I never expected. At the person who had been patient, kind, and honest with me even when I hadn't been brave enough to be the same. And I knew my answer. Because some things are worth the risk. Some people are worth choosing. And standing there, at the edge of almost losing her, I realized. This was the moment that would define everything that came after. I chose honesty. Not because it was easy. Not because I suddenly stopped being afraid. But because, in that moment, Honesty felt like the only way forward. I took a breath and told her everything. Not the polished version of my story. Not the safe parts. The real ones. I told her about the heartbreaks that had changed me. About the trust one had given once, and lost. About how that loss taught me to build walls instead of bridges. How I learned to protect my heart by keeping it distant, untouched, hidden. I told her how I had convinced myself that being alone was safer than being vulnerable. How routine had become my comfort zone. How I had mistaken control for peace. And then I told her the part that scared me the most. I told her how she had changed my days without even trying. How my thoughts found their way back to her, again and again. How my life felt different just because she was in it. I didn't rush. I didn't hide. I let the words fall exactly as they were, imperfect, unguarded, real. She listened. Not the way people sometimes listen, waiting for their turn to speak, half present, distracted. She listened completely. Her eyes stayed on mine. Her expression didn't harden. She didn't interrupt or try to fix me. She simply held the space between us and let my truth exist there. That kind of listening felt rare. Sacred. When I finished, there was a quiet moment between us. Not uncomfortable. Just still. Then she spoke. "I don't need perfection," she said softly. Her voice carried no demand. No pressure. "I just need truth." Those words settled deep in my chest. Because for the first time, I realized she wasn't asking me to be fearless. She was asking me to be present. So I gave it to her. Not halfway. Not cautiously. Fully. Choosing her meant risking pain. It meant opening myself up to uncertainty, knowing there were no guarantees. Knowing that love could still hurt. Knowing that nothing real comes without vulnerability. But it also meant choosing growth. Choosing connection. Choosing something honest and alive instead of something controlled and empty. For the first time, I didn't step back. I didn't disappear when things felt real. I didn't run at the first sign of fear. I stayed. And in staying, I felt something shift inside me. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to move forward despite it. I realized then that choosing her wasn't just about choosing another person. It was about choosing a different version of myself. One who was willing to feel. One who was willing to risk. One who believed that love was worth the chance. And standing there, with honesty between us and possibility ahead of us, I knew. This was the choice that changed everything. Love didn't fix everything overnight. There was no sudden transformation. No perfect ending that erased every fear or healed every wound. We didn't wake up one day knowing exactly how to love each other the right way. We learned. Slowly. Imperfectly. Honestly. Some days were easy. Laughter came naturally, filling spaces that once felt empty. Other days were harder. We misunderstood each other. We argued. We said things we didn't mean and learned how to apologize for them. But even in those moments, something was different. We stayed. We chose to listen instead of walking away. We chose patience instead of silence. We chose each other again and again, even when it wasn't effortless. And somehow, through all of that, life began to feel fuller. Not louder. Not busier. Just fuller. Mornings didn't feel as empty anymore. Even routine days carried a quiet warmth. Simple moments, shared coffee, late conversations, comfortable silence, started to matter more than anything extraordinary ever had. Life felt brighter. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was real. She didn't just walk into my life. She changed how I lived it. She taught me that love isn't about perfect timing. That waiting to feel completely ready often means waiting forever. That courage matters more than certainty. She showed me that love doesn't arrive when fear disappears. It arrives when you decide not to let fear lead anymore. Through her, I learned that vulnerability isn't weakness. That needing someone doesn't make you less, it makes you human. That opening your heart doesn't guarantee happiness, but closing it guarantees loneliness. I learned how to trust again. Not blindly, but bravely. I learned that love grows in honesty. In showing up on the hard days. In choosing connection over control. In allowing yourself to be seen, even when it feels uncomfortable. There were moments I thought back to the person I used to be. The one who lived safely behind walls. The one who mistook distance for peace. The one who believed ordinary was enough. And I realized something important. That version of me wasn't wrong. He was just afraid. But fear no longer had the final say. Because once she walked in, my life was never the same. Not because she completed me. Not because she saved me. But because she walked beside me. She didn't ask me to be perfect. She asked me to be present. And in being present, I found a version of myself I didn't know I was capable of becoming. Love didn't erase my past. It gave it meaning. It didn't promise forever without struggle. It promised growth, honesty, and choice. And this time, I chose love. Not once. Not impulsively. But every day. Even when it felt uncertain. Even when it required courage. Even when it meant risking pain. Because some moments change you. Some people stay with you. And some choices rewrite the way you live your life. She walked in. And everything changed. Please don't forget, like, share and subscribe.